In today's session of the Purple Copy Podcast, I speak to Ethan Austin of GiveForward about how you need to niche before you spread those wings. Hello and welcome to session 39 of the Purple Coffee Podcast, inspiring entrepreneurial stories from some of the world's most awesomest. I'm your host, Turndog, and on this occasion I speak to Ethan Austin, who's one of the co-founders of GiveForward. And to say these guys were on the block before everyone else is a bleeding understatement, because you may have heard of crowdfunding right now and associated with sites like Kickstarter, but Ethan and GiveForward were about before crowdfunding was even a term, and there was just a handful of these wonderful platforms. So I was delighted to jump on call with him and talk about crowdfunding in general and what it truly means to him, but also to uncover his big, juicy, great mistake. Because as you may have guessed, this is all in aid of my book, The Success Mistake, which is all about a entrepreneurial's grandest faux pas and how they transformed it around. I cannot wait to share this with you. He's going to be sharing all in the conversation, and I'll be also sharing a quick bio of his soon. But first, let's delve a little bit into what you're about to learn. You see, Ethan and his team, when they started GiveForward, they tried to be something for everyone. If you needed to write a book and get that funded, they were for you. If you had a new product, they were for you. If you were trying to raise money for some kind of medical procedure, they were for you, and as such became a master of none. And they stilted their growth in doing so. And they learned really how to niche themselves before spreading their wings, which several years later they are now just beginning to do once more. But with the all-important balance and focus that, well, all successful companies tend to have. And it leads also to the sub-mistake, which is all about building a well-balanced team, because they had a lot of creative people who knew how to get things done, but they didn't have a technical creator, so they pumped a lot of money into the website and platform and then were unable to pivot without spending lots of money. And if you don't have the money to spend, then you can't do that. So there's lots and lots to take from this. I hope you take as much from it as I did. I know I took a huge amount, and we're gonna get straight into the interview now, because that is why you're listening after all. But let me first introduce you to Ethan and his world in a little short bio which I created in his honor, because, you know, I like to write and such. So let's do that, shall we? What Ethan Austin doesn't know about crowdfunding isn't worth knowing about, kid. This is a guy who's been there from the beginning, rocking it with GiveForward before crowdfunding was even a term, and even before Kickstarter was a thing. Oh my gosh. But the great thing about Ethan is his focus on medical campaigns, for it's an expensive and often unavoidable heartache that can happen to any of us. This makes him a do-gooder of huge proportions and possibly a future saint. I actually sense he's already a saint, placed into sainthood some time ago, but because he's humble as your grandma's pie and as selfless as the guy who gives his lady love his last chewing gum, he keeps it on the down low. Well, I'm here to flaunt his good deeds and epic proportions, so bow down to Saint Ethan and the wonderful work he does each day at GiveForward. Here we are, speaking and such. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. I have on the show today the wonderful Ethan Austin, who's the co-founder of GiveForward. A very cool company indeed. And I'm going to pass it over to Ethan in just a second to share a little bit more about that and what he does in general. But first of all, Ethan, thank you so much for joining me this evening, although for you it's middle of the afternoon, so still the day ahead of you.
I feel like I'm talking into the future then.
Yeah, I'm like Marty McSuperfly right now, looking back into the past. So that's all very exciting. So yes, how are you? How are you today?
I'm good.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, like I say, this is going to be in aid of The Success Mistake, which those who watch this podcast regularly will know. It's a book I'm writing about an entrepreneur's big mistake and how they switched it around into a great success and the lessons learned and things of the sort. But first, I'm just going to pass it over to you, Ethan, just to share a little bit more about, what it is you do and
Sure.
how you work
So
at GiveForward.
yeah, so GiveForward is a crowdfunding platform. We help people, for the most part, raise money for their loved ones' out-of-pocket medical expenses. So in the U.S., we have a horrible healthcare system, and
Yeah.
even when you have insurance, and even when something is covered, there's tons of costs that are uncovered. All these out-of-pocket medical expenses associated with it. So when a loved one gets sick, all their friends are always asking, well, what can I do to help? And what we do is we give them and empower them and give them a tool that allows them to help their friends and loved ones. They set up a crowdfunding page on GiveForward, and they share it with their friends on Facebook via email, and then friends and family can contribute and leave words of support. So all of a sudden, that person who thinks he or she is alone, fighting cancer, battling some illness all by themselves, out of the woodwork comes 100 people who say, "Hey, you're gonna get through this. Maybe my brother had this before, and here's his number. He got through it. You're not alone. We all love you. We all support you. And here's $50 towards this. Here's $100 towards it. At the end, they might raise $5,000 or $10,000, and have a bunch of people letting them know like that there's a troop of people, supporting them.
It's so important because, crowdfunding's a huge thing these days. And the sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter is fantastic for building products and campaigns and books and films and everything like that. But yeah, it's so easy to forget that one of the biggest things in life, it's family, it's friends, and you just never know when something truly earth-shattering is going to come along and just rock your world. And like you say, in some countries, like in England, it's not too bad financially, but in a place like America, not only do you have that emotional heartache, you're faced with this ridiculous financial heartache too. It must be so difficult. So a platform like this, wow, great.
Yeah, I think it's hard. It's hard to get better when you're not focusing your energy on healing, but you're focusing your energy on how are we going to cover these finances, and that stress that people have, that additional stress on top of it, really actually prevents them from getting better and
Yeah.
focusing all their energy on how to heal. So
And like you say, it's not all about the money. It's the way for you to like send support people who have maybe suffered with this in the past. It's a chance to be like, I was there, I got through this. If you ever want to reach out and speak to me, I'm here. And things like that are priceless.
yeah, and honestly, like another thing we've learned is it's not just about the person who's receiving the money, but it's all about those 30, 50 people around them who all felt helpless before and now feel empowered to do something. So it's just as much a tool for them as it is for the person who they were helping, because it's hard to struggle and watch one of your friends be sick or whatever's happening and feel helpless around it. So
Indeed. Well, I'll be putting a link to GiveForward below, so be sure to check that out. And if you're in a generous mood and you can spare a little bit of money, check out a campaign or two. And if you're able to help, please do, because what a wonderful, worthy cause it is. So yeah, like I say, this is all about the successful mistake, and we're going to be chatting with Ethan about his grand one, something that rocked his personal world in the business sense, and how he turned it all around, because I'm a firm believer mistakes are wonderful life lessons, and if we approach them in the right manner, then they can be the catalyst to great things. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Ethan. I know you've been mulling over one or two options, so tell us that story, how it came about, a bit about the journey since, and we'll take it from there.
yeah, well, I mean, you said what is the one mistake, and I'm like, one mistake. We've had a billion mistakes, and we continue to make them every day.
Yeah.
So I think one that was very pivotal in the beginning. So we launched in 2008. In 2008, it was us, Indiegogo, and about three other four other crowdfunding platforms launching around the same time. And now, today there's over 1,000 crowdfunding platforms. So it was very early, and back then it wasn't even called crowdfunding. We all called it peer-to-peer fundraising is the term that we all used back then. Kickstarter launched in 2009 and really popularized the idea for crowdfunding and helped lift all the boats and helped popularize this concept, I think, around the world. So, thank God for them. But in the early days, it was really tough. And in the early days, we actually started off as a crowdfunding platform for anything. And whether that was college loans, whether that was a new business, whether that was an arts project, whether that was medical expenses, nonprofits, volunteer travel trips, anything you could think of, we were a crowdfunding platform for that. And we were also a crowdfunding platform started by two people that knew nothing about startups. And I don't think we even knew the name. I don't even think we knew the word startups in 2008. I don't think it wasn't the idea of starting a company in startups. It wasn't as, super popular back then. So we didn't really know what we were doing, and we were trying to be very, very broad. And in that first year, we raised a total of $6,000 in revenue. And what we realized, that first year is our big mistake, I guess, really was trying to be all things to everyone, right? And in doing so, we didn't connect with anyone. In doing so, no one really loved our platform, and we were spreading ourselves way too thin. So we were trying to connect with sororities and fraternities and nonprofits and all these different groups, and we only had two people and a handful of interns. So what we realized at some point is the people that loved our platform the most, was, and this only happened a handful of times throughout the course of the first year, were the people using it for medical expenses. And so we started to just listen to our users. We had this one woman who, she was in Wisconsin. We're based out of Chicago. Wisconsin's about an hour away. And she emailed us to say, like, hey, this, I don't know what we would have done without you. This was so powerful to us. I want to just come down to your guys' office and give you guys a hug. And we're like, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, no one else is saying anything like that to us. So at some point we realized, the people raising money for medical expenses are raising way more money than anyone else. And they're entirely appreciative of what we're doing while everyone else is kind of about our product. And so why don't we focus on the people who really love this? And, we did what I call a slow pivot. It took us about a year and a half to kind of move in that direction, from narrowing from, being all things to everyone, to kind of focusing more on the medical expenses side of things. And once we looked into the issue and realized how big of a problem it is, it became obvious to us. But at first, it wasn't obvious. And now 5 of the top 10 crowdfunding platforms in the world, the number one category is medical expenses. So it was something we saw early from listening to our users. But I think the big mistake early on was we had this vision in our mind, and it was to be a crowdfunding platform for anything in the world, and sticking to that vision, even though our users were telling us, hey, you should do this because this is where you're making more money, and this is where it's really meaningful for people.
I mean, that's something that I think so many people, no matter what kind of business you set up, go through. We talk about you want to dominate a niche, but in the beginning you think, well, what if I choose the wrong niche? I need to kind of be somewhat broad. I need to put my feet in a couple of different paths in the hope that one of them sticks. And I was speaking to someone the other day where, you can start off and treat it as a bit of a beta type movement where, you start off trying to be everything for everyone. But like you say, actually then follow the path of what your users tell you. So if they're using particular features or if they're telling you certain things, hone in on that as soon as possible. And before you know it, you will be going down a right path. So it's amazing to hear that you did listen to your users and, they ultimately led the way for you.
Yeah, I mean, we have them to thank for where we're at today, for sure.
Now, you mentioned about doing a slow pivot, and it took you like a year and a half before you finally took the move. Like, what was holding you back during that period? Obviously, things weren't going well. You had this user base who was saying, come on, just be for us. We'll get you back. What was stopping you from taking the plunge?
Two things. One was my co-founder and I were neither of us are technical, and at the time we were bootstrapping the web. Before we took any funding, we'd bootstrapped the website for 2 years, and this was in the first 2 years. And so you read the lean startup and it says like talk to your customers because it allows you to pivot quickly and allows you to be nimble and change your product very quickly. Well, we had outsourced all our development and we had a total budget. We started the website with $50,000 and had used pretty much all of our budget building, for the most part, the website. And so we couldn't change things very quickly. So while we would be on the phone talking to people saying, hey, we're a website mostly dedicated to uh, medical expenses, and we talked to, let's say it was a nonprofit that has lots of people who are sick with like lung disease, and they're like, yeah, this sounds really great, but when I go to your website, it says raise money for anything,
Yeah.
and so like it was in part a slow pivot because we'd be telling people one thing, but we didn't have the funds to really build the product around what we were saying. We were telling people a story, but our product still said something else. And it took us, because we were bootstrapped, it just took us an incredibly long time to really build the product into the vision that we were telling people offline.
Wow. And that is obviously so hard because ideally when you start something in beta form, you spend as little time and as little money on it as possible. But when you're building a platform, that's never going to be cheap. Maybe it's a little bit cheaper now to create a crowdfunding platform. There's probably a bit of a structure out there, but at the time,
Yeah.
that would have been a huge build. And like you say, if you're starting off with a pot of 50K and just about all of it goes on just getting this website up and going, it doesn't give you much leeway to sort of change down the line.
No, I mean, that in and of itself is one of the big mistakes. I mean, when I talk to people starting today, and they don't have a technical co-founder. I'm like, don't go find your technical co-founder. Neither of us are technical, and looking back on it, it's like the fact that we even launched without a technical co-founder to me is amazing, because and I think it took us a really long time. I think that probably that process would have sped up a bit if we had someone on the team who could actually implement what we what we were talking about, what we were thinking about, and what we were envisioning.
So how eventually did you create this pivot? Did extra funding come in? Did you save up the money? Did you kind of just take a bit of a plunge and decide, the hell with it, we're just going to go all in? Like, when did the decision kind of alter for you?
We were very fortunate, and I think um, we got into in 2010. We launched in 2008. In 2010, we got into a program called Accelerate Labs, which later became TechStars. And TechStars is a startup accelerator, and from that program, we ended up raising a little bit of a seed round of $500,000 and brought on our first lead engineer. He's been, almost like a third co-founder, just an amazing partner, these last 4 years, in helping to, build out our engineering team and giving us the ability to change a little bit more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we talk these days about, I mean, especially being a kind of solopreneur myself, you start off as a one-man band. You don't always need co-founders. You don't need to share the pie in that sense, and you can freelance everything. But in certain industries and in certain ideas that you have, it just makes sense to have maybe 2 or 3 people who can bring in their expertise. And if you're trying to build an online kind of platform, not necessarily an online brand, but an online platform where it needs a lot of technical ability, then having that technical co-founder, that technical director is going to be a huge benefit than rather outsourcing everything to a different company where they're just going to treat it as any other project.
Yeah, I mean, not only will it help you build faster? It's incredibly hard to get, investment if you're ever seeking investors, whether they're angel investors or venture capitalists. It's incredibly hard to get investors to invest if you don't have a technical co-founder. They just see you being uh, so handicapped, that it's just going to be for them a hard investment to make.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I
And
mean, no, go ahead.
depending on the type of the business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in something that you kind of got in, the technical founder's always so big. I mean, you always hear these booming industries, these booming companies, and quite often they are, technical founders, and then they had the other problem. They were really good at building a product and not necessarily good at marketing it and bringing in investment. So there's just certain industries, and I think being online in those big platform type areas, you just need a bit of a mixture, and doing it all on your own back is probably just, well, it's beyond anyone.
Yeah, for sure.
So obviously you got a bit of investment, you were able to plow it in, and were you kind of all in then and figured out, well, we've been listening to our customers, we've been taking it down this platform, now the money's there, we're going to just completely another pivot now, take the plunge and go into the sort of medical section, just get rid of the anything for all.
Yeah, and I mean the funny thing is now, 6 years later, we're actually broadening out again,
Oh,
right? We're
really?
seeing, yeah, I mean medical is still obviously such a huge need, but now we never prevented people from using it for other things. And over the years, we've had lots of people use it for memorial fundraisers. Someone passes away, they want to start a college fund for the kids. We've had so many people use it for adoptions, for things like in vitro fertilization. We've had people use it for their pet fundraisers after a fire. If you think about it this way, it's like you think of Kickstarter as the place for people to go fund their dreams,
Mm.
and GiveForward is a place where people have gone to go fund hope, right? So anytime you need hope and you're like in a situation where someone, you want to rally around someone, is a situation where people have kind of used GiveForward. And 6 years ago, I don't think the market was strong enough, was mature enough to support all these other categories. But now all these other categories are starting to flourish.
Mm. And it brings me back to what you said originally, the way you had this vision where you wanted to help people in various different ways. And someone at home might be thinking, well, it's all good choosing a niche, but I've got this grand vision. I want to be everything for everyone, and I believe I can. And it goes to show that sometimes you just need to hone in on a niche to begin with, but it doesn't mean that you're going to just be part of that niche forever. As the years
Hmm.
tick by, you can add, another bridge to things. You can diversify slowly but surely. And here you are 6 years later, starting to go back into that, be everything for everyone, although still within quite a sort of
Yeah.
narrow spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, one of the neatest things we've seen over the past couple of years is that people will see stuff on the news that either saddens them or inspires them, and they say, "I want to do something about it." They might not know this person at all, but they'll start a fundraiser for that
Yeah.
person, and the next day, 2 days later, it'll be $50,000 in a fundraiser for someone that they saw on the news that just inspired them, and all these people are sitting around saying like, "I want to make the news actionable. I want
Yeah.
to do something," and so they'll share that fundraiser, and there's a lot of people who saw the same thing in the news that felt the same way. So giving them a tool to really do something actionable is pretty neat, and that's just happened organically over the last couple of years. Is these people started seeing things in the news and started give forward fundraisers for them.
Fantastic. And it's so funny you say that because I was just watching the news not 30 minutes ago, and fairly close to where I live, a place called Manchester had a big fire at a dog sort of adoption area, I suppose, like a pound where stray dogs go. And they basically managed to save a lot of the dogs, but a lot of them did die. And it appeared on the news, and they sent out a plea saying we need to raise £5,000 to just feed these dogs. And within, I think, 3 days, it was over £500,000. And I believe they set it up on, a kind of
Sure.
give forward type platform, but I think might have been Sponsor Me, which is I think more specialised for England. And yeah, within a
Sure.
few days, 500,000, because like you say, people saw it in the news and thought, wow, I can help, keep these dogs alive, and it just boomed.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past people haven't had the ability to
Yeah.
do something instantaneous. Now, like I think what's cool with crowdfunding and what's cool with where it's going is anyone can be a hero. Anyone can step up and say, we have so much of there's a bystander effect, right? Where lots of times people think someone else is going to step up and do something. But when that person actually steps up and says, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to start a crowdfunding page. I'm going to start a Give Forward page for this person. Like it's this magical thing that happens is that like everyone comes together and says, "Gosh, I was thinking the same thing. I wish I had done that." And but I'm going to contribute to this. And the next thing you know, you have 500,000 pounds,
Mm.
as an outpouring of support. And not only do these puppies have food, but the shelter that where they were at, now has a brand new shelter and new facilities, and are able to help so many more dogs.
I
So
absolutely love the concept of crowdfunding. I have done for a few years now, and I always talk about how it's not so much the funding side. Yeah, that's fantastic. Whether, and obviously for the medical side of things, that is a big, big part of it because it's to save lives. But it's the crowd so much as anything because it just gives people, like you say, an outlet to actually come together and do something actionable rather than just see something on the news and go, oh, that's so sad, or that's really inspiring. I'd love to be involved, but instead I'm just gonna, go downstairs and play on, the computer. Now they're
yeah,
able to actually go downstairs and log on and contribute, get send out some support, and that crowd can be oh so valuable. I mean, not just in the
yeah,
now, but for the future.
yeah. No, it's pretty cool to see
Mm,
people
amazing.
participating and becoming part of the solution, right? They have the
Yeah.
old saying, part of the problem or part of the solution. And I don't even, is that the saying? If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. That's the same.
That's
But
the
but
one,
now
yeah.
some people can be part of the solution. So it's neat.
Yeah, it allows people to be proactive and everything, and rather than just moan and complain and say, "Oh, if only." Well, there's
Yeah.
no if only anymore. You can actually do it, so it's great to see. And I think it's a great journey because you started off doing something before it was popular, which is admirable in its own sense. People think, oh yeah, it's easy to run a crowdsourcing place now. It's really popular. But in 2008, it wasn't even called that, and I think most businesses, most business people, they start off with this grand vision. They want to help a lot of people, but that's easier said than done. You sometimes have to narrow down. And I suppose the key thing you've taken from it all, other than maybe bringing in a technical mind, was just to listen to your users, see what they're saying. After all, they are your most valuable resource.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it was kind of like predated, the lean startup. It makes so much sense now.
Yeah,
But back then we were just like, we don't know what to do, but these people keep telling us this works. We had no idea what customer development was or any of these things that you're supposed to do now that it now seems so obvious. But at the time it was like, I don't know, let's see. These people seem to like it. Let's try this. So I mean, it was that or shut the doors because we weren't making any money. We were gonna have to shut down. So
yeah.
I think it was a little bit of good luck and listening to those users and being at the right place at the right time.
You were ahead of your time, my good man. Always good to meet someone who's, part of that sort of proactive walk of life. So I suppose to just sum things up, if there's someone out there who they kind of know they've started too broad, they bit off a bit too much from they chew, no matter what industry they're in, and they're looking at their business now and thinking, I need to do a bit of a pivot. I need to narrow down my ideas. I know I was in that situation probably about 8 months ago, and I'm still, trying to narrow it down. Difficult decisions, really hard. What would you advise these people to take some maybe actionable steps right now to help them get from here to here?
Yeah, I mean, I would go out first, talk to your users, talk to the people that are using it and are they passionate about it. And I'd find the ones where you're actually solving a real problem. Because if you can solve a real problem for people, they're going to pay for that. All right. The problem we were solving for people is they were starting fundraisers, outside of GiveForward. They were doing bake sales and all these other things, but it was hard. And this solved a real problem for them. For the people doing study abroad, and wanted to raise some money for study abroad, the problem wasn't as acute as the person whose friend is sick,
Yeah.
right? And that solved a real problem, and there was a sense of urgency around that. And so I would look to, which of your users are you solving a real problem for, and then hone in on that, because if you can solve a real problem for people, then you have a business.
I think that's really great advice because ultimately, when you create a business or a product or a service, the whole point is you're going to fulfill a need, you're going to solve a problem, you're going to make someone's life easier. So, like you say, it's not only just a case of listening and being observant to what your users are saying and using and doing, but also, how big of a problem am I solving right now? And if you're able to help someone raise money that's going to save lives, that's a really big problem to say, well, just help them, get their first car, for instance.
Right.
That's a really
Right.
big. That's fulfilling a need for someone, really. For somebody, but it's not necessarily solving a big problem. So I think that's great advice. Excellent. Well, what an amazing journey. I love it. I love it. And it's great to see someone who, went through all this before it was, the fad thing, before it was the done thing, and was part of such an amazing movement from the get-go. Like I say, I'm a huge fan of the entire concept of crowdfunding, and I'm so excited to see where it goes. So really great chatting to you. And yeah, your journey is great. I'm sure plenty of people watching and listening have taken a lot from it. So Ethan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is fun.
Absolute pleasure. And viewers/listener, thank you for joining us. Cheers. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you oh so much for joining me on today's session of the Purple Coffee Podcast. And a big, humongous thanks to Ethan Austin for sharing his good times. What a great mistake it was indeed. When we all start out, we don't really know who we want to target. And it took a while before Ethan and his co-founders decided to listen to their most valuable prized assets, which, of course, their customers. And they basically pointed them down direction of saying, we want you to be the go-to platform to help people raise money for things like medical procedures, and what a worthy cause it is. And as such, it makes them one of my most faved crowdfunding platforms. But it took some stilted growth for them to get there. So if you're making a new product or service and it isn't just quite right, and it isn't quite connecting all the dots you hope it will, fear not. For you can iterate, you can evolve the process, and you can even, to an extent, pivot, even though that is a rather overused word. But the point is, you can turn it around, and I think Ethan shows just how that is possible. He's a top guy. I hope you will check him out and GiveForward. It's an amazing community, and it's one that's just continuing to grow and grow. And he's got some really interesting insights into the crowdfunding sphere and scape and universe, so be sure to check it out. All the links and show notes are provided at tdog.co/purplecoffee39. That's tdog.co/purplecoffee39. I encourage you on huge scales to check him out. He's a great guy, and it was an absolute pleasure to connect with him, and he continues to be a great support for me in the meantime. So yeah, that's pretty much it. While there, I hope you'll consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing this very podcast. It means oh so much to me. And if you believe someone you know may get some value from this show, share the love, kid. Share the love with them. Send an email or a tweet or a Facebook or something. And if you are listening to this on your phone, fear not. I don't want you to do that right now, but when you get 5 minutes later, I hope you'll consider doing so. That is it. Another session of the Purple Coffee Podcast at an end, but I will be speaking to you soon. In the meantime, have a most awesome end to your day, and yeah, keep it cool. Cheers.